a girl from Malaysia who embraced the unknown when she went abroad to study and then made America not just her home, but also her professional base to thrive and succeed, despite having no contacts or networks when she started out. She experienced various challenges as an Asian woman, from discrimination to sexual harassment, and had a hard time looking for a female mentor in the construction and architecture industry. During the global lockdown last year, she decided to write a book that described her own journey as an Asian woman and how she believes Asian women would do well to leverage stereotypes to their advantage. Hello and welcome to Season 3 of the Womenpreneur Asia podcast, and I'm your host, Krista Good. I'm also an entrepreneur, author, marketeer, storyteller, and connector. As the host of Womenpreneur Asia, I talk to Asian women entrepreneurs to uncover their personal stories of grit, hope, and transformation. These are real stories of courage and optimism from inspiring yet down-to-earth women in business across Asia. This episode is brought to you by my company, Redbox Studio. Womenpreneur Asia has always centered around Asian women entrepreneurs, and interestingly, in these 3 seasons, I've also met many inspiring women who aren't entrepreneurs but are intrinsically entrepreneurial. This is a bonus episode where I spotlight women who think and talk all things entrepreneurial, although they may not be entrepreneurs. Today's episode is with Malaysian-born Dianne Lee, who is an executive director with Kitchell Corporation, a construction engineering company in the US. We discovered we had many things in common, and we both grew up in the same state, which is Selangor, a state in Malaysia. We both studied communications and journalism, and we both have this curiosity and desire to find out more about the world, and we both want to support other women too. And now let's get into today's bonus episode. Hello and welcome to Womenpreneur Asia, Dianne.
Thank you so much for having me, Krista. Pleasure to be here.
So Dianne, before we get into your story, where are you physically located?
Thank you for asking the question. So I actually live in Los Angeles. My house specifically is in Pasadena, California.
And how is it like right now in Pasadena?
So this is the time where we transition into fall and winter, and the weather is pretty nice. Definitely a lot cooler in Malaysia. But the fortunate thing about those of us who live in Los Angeles is it's sunny all year round. And that's why people come to California.
Okay. So you've chosen a very nice place to be then.
Very blessed. I'll have to say I've lived all over the place. I've lived in the Middle East. I've lived in Asia. By far, California is one of the nicest places with the most gorgeous weather to be in.
Okay. So now that we know where you are, who are you, Dianne?
That's an excellent question. It'll be interesting to see how my parents answer that question. But I will tell you that I am a Chinese Malaysian girl, true and true, born and raised in Klang, believe it or not, and was blessed enough and fortunate enough to come to America, found my way to Los Angeles, and started a career in broadcast journalism. I went to school in America at Indiana State University and did a few pivots in my career. And now I'm in business development for a construction firm. And I serve on several construction industry boards. And I'm utilizing my platform to pay it forward for other minority women.
Okay. So your story is quite interesting in the sense that you went to America to study and you stayed on.
That's right.
What was it? Yeah. So what was it in that, in America that made you want to stay on and kept you intrigued all these years?
No, that's an excellent question. So I actually, after graduating from college, did go back to Malaysia for a couple of years. And actually ended up working for NTV7 as a news reporter. I don't know if you remember those days, but that was quite a long time ago. And subsequently after that, had a conversation with my parents and said to my mom that I wanted to come back to America because I wanted to explore what else was out there in journalism. And I knew that in America, they did news very differently. It had a very entertaining aspect to it. They were highly efficient in how they broadcasted their news, their breaking news. And so I was very interested in that. And I just so thankful to have parents who supported that dream and said, okay, you're welcome to go back to America. So that's what I did. And, to your question, what really kept me in America is the possibilities. We often hear that America is a land of opportunity. And I will tell you that as a Chinese Malaysian girl from Klang, that it's held true with my life. So, it's the potential of doing whatever you set your mind to, not to say that you can't achieve that in Malaysia, but it's just a different platform, right? And you're dealing with a different magnitude of people. I'll have to say that.
So I do remember NTV7.
A lot of people do, actually. We were one of the most watched stations at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you've been in America for so long. And now, do you consider yourself Malaysian? You're Malaysian-born, of course. But how do you live in like two different cultures, right? I mean, you're Malaysian-born, you have your identity as a Malaysian, but now you're in America. So this is really totally different altogether culturally. How do you cross that divide?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my parents still live in Klang in Malaysia, in the house that I was pretty much raised in since I was 6. So when I do make it home, that's where I end up. I always tell people I have the best of both worlds. My upbringing as a Chinese Malaysian girl. But then I also see the Western way of looking at things, right? I'm, jumping at every opportunity. I'm a little bit more aggressive, I would say, than most Asian women. So I've been able to balance in, what I write a lot about in my book, the yin and the yang, taking the best of both worlds and then living my best life. So I hope that answers your question.
Which parts of Malaysia do you miss most?
So, there's that saying, you can take the girl out of Malaysia, but you can't take the Malaysian out of the girl.
Yeah.
So, I grew up loving to eat, and I am still that way today. All of my friends here in LA are like, where do you put all that food? So my ferocious appetite for just a variety of food and cuisines continue to live in me today. And I think that's what makes me most Malaysian. Also, I think my core values, the way we were raised. I'm sure you remember, Krista, you get up for someone else if you're, at the bus stand or, if all the seats are taken, you do the right thing, right? You refer to those who are older than you as your aunties and your uncles. I hold all of those values close to my chest. I continue to live that way today. And so I've been able to blend what's very American about me and how progressive I am and in my work culture. But then, at the end of the day, I come back to my house and my happy place is, being Chinese Malaysian. Yeah.
I do believe that you can't ever take the Malaysian out of you, no matter where you are, in whatever part of the world.
And I think for me, I've been really fortunate and really intentional in really securing that about who I am. So even though I'm working and living in America and I work in a very Caucasian and male-dominated industry, what makes me different is the fact that I'm Chinese Malaysian, is the fact that I approach everyone with kindness and respect, because that's how I was raised.
Yeah. That's really a wonderful tribute to your origins.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And I attribute that to my parents. I wouldn't be that way if it wasn't for their teachings. And I know that, so I'm very intentional about my movements.
Okay, and you mentioned about your book. So let's get into your book. So I know you wrote your book during the pandemic lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
So what spurred you to get into book writing in the midst of
So,
lockdown?
if you were to ask me, 10 years ago, if I ever thought I would publish a book, I'd probably not only say no, I would say hell no.
Why?
Because I just didn't have the desire or the passion at that time. Even though I went to broadcasting school and my journalism skills are there, I'm a fairly good writer. I never thought I would publish a book. I'm pretty successful in the career that I have, and so there was really no need. But I think not only did the pandemic change everything for us, I think there was an administration in America that also changed things for the Asian community. I think the combination of COVID-19 and having an administration that was clearly unsupportive of other races really bothered me. And what really drove me to write my book was when the violence started and the attacks against Asians started. That really struck me to the core. And I realized that I was not born and raised in America, that I came to America as an immigrant. But I see all Asian communities as my brothers and sisters. If you hurt one of them, you hurt me, right? And there were a lot of different blanket statements about Asians and who we are and why we are here, and I am fortunate that I'm in a point in my career now where I have a voice, I have a platform, I have a fairly huge industry network. And when I speak, people listen. And so I thought if I could combine my skills as a journalist and as a writer, my industry network and the platform that I have with all of the different industry organizations that I serve, that I could develop this book to speak about, the contributions of immigrants and the contributions of Asian Americans in general. And I think as Asians, we tend to work really hard and make great things happen, but we don't do a very good job about bragging about ourselves because it's not within our culture. And I thought that writing my book and writing about all the different things that we do in support and in contribution of the American economy would be a great reminder to Americans in general that we do our part and that we're here for a reason. And that we, at the end of the day, we all thrive together, regardless of the color of your skin.
That's a great message. And was that message something that was really like in your heart and you wanted to tell it to the world, but in the book format?
So I'm a very proud Chinese, Malaysian, Asian American. That is who I am. I refuse to let anybody diminish who we are and the contributions that we bring to this country. I work really hard for my position. I work harder than a lot of other people because I'm a woman and because I'm a minority. And I work for a very Caucasian and male-dominated industry. So I've really had to choose my battles, and I've really had to stay persistent and have really had to rise up through the ranks. None of this was given to me, right? And to hear certain people in very high leadership positions say derogatory things about Asians in general, to me was very harmful and hurtful, and because I have a fairly large platform and I'm very active on social media, I wanted to turn the yin into a yang. So that's ultimately what I did.
Was it hard writing and publishing the book during a pandemic?
It wasn't hard in the sense that I have this skill set to write, because, a lot of what I do in business development in my job is writing. You have to have fairly good writing skills. I think what was hard was when you write a book and you want to make a meaningful impact, you have to talk about your personal life. And I am, for the most part, very private about my personal life. I don't mix personal and professional. So when I decided to write my book, I had to lay it all out there. I didn't have a choice, right? Because in order to write a good book, you have to be authentic about who you are. And you have to let the reader know why your story matters. So I think the hardest part was making the decision about letting people know the struggles that I had to overcome as an Asian woman in a male-dominated industry. And I've really had to share some intimate details that I've never told anyone in my entire life, not even my parents. So I even had to apologize to them. I mean, in chapter 8 specifically, I talk about how certain men have treated me and how I've had to overcome those challenges while maintaining my integrity and my self-esteem. And I think it was really hard for my parents to read it. And they even said, Dianne, we wish that you would have told us. But I, as a typical Chinese Malaysian daughter, I didn't want to worry my parents, right? Because there's not much they can do from Malaysia. But I appreciate their comments. I understand where they come from. But again, going back to my book, I talk about how we can achieve success without selling our soul. By staying true to who we are, our convictions, our religion, our faith, all that good stuff.
I love it that in your book that you talked about those experiences in your life, the good and the bad, which I think what makes a good book is that it's not just all about the wonderful, beautiful things, but it's also the challenges and the hardships that you've gone through that made you who you are, which I think is even more important, even though the good stuff is good, but, those are the experiences, which I read in your book. And I felt that's very brave of you to write about when, you had those unwanted attention
right
from the men who were supposed to be your peers, your associates. And it must have been really shocking. And because right now it's in the book, it's out there, right?
Right.
So have you had people who have read the book come to you and say, hey, Dianne, I didn't know it happened to you, or it happened to me too? Did that kind of experiences, come across?
Yeah, no, I understand the question. So I think one of the most fulfilling things about me writing the book, when I wrote the book, I had no idea how people were going to react to it because I'm usually pretty private. But it's been one of the most fulfilling experience because of what you just mentioned. I have more people now, friends within my inner circle, as well as complete strangers come up to me. They send me emails through LinkedIn or they find me through my work email. And they share their struggles. And the first thing they say is, thank you so much for writing your book. And I always smile and I always say, why do you say that? And they say, because they lived through it and they didn't have the courage to talk to anyone. And I said, I understand that. I said, because for the last 15 plus years, I've kept it to myself. So to me, that has been the most fulfilling and rewarding part about writing this book. I've not had any backlash. I will say that, which is great. I'm fortunate, and I appreciate that. And people have been very encouraging, and very grateful that I actually wrote the book, to be honest, because I think they see the bigger picture, that I wrote it because I genuinely want to support all women. I don't care if you're a minority or not, because we all share similar struggles. To have a voice at a meeting, to earn our seat at the table, to be taken seriously, to be given the promotions that we deserve. And, let's talk pay equity, right? That's the biggest, I call it a discrepancy. Why are we working 3 times harder and making 3 times less? So
your book raises a lot of important issues. Not just only about, issues that concern the Asian American people, right? But also about things that concern women in general. Mm-hmm. So now let's get into talking about being a woman. You mentioned a couple of times that you're a woman in a very male-dominated industry. How have you managed to succeed despite being in such a male-dominated industry as construction, right?
Right. And so I mentor a lot of younger women. And I think everybody is eager to rise through the ranks fairly quickly. And everybody thinks that they should have the vice president title, that they should be making, a 6-figure salary. And I'm in business development, and what I do is all about establishing relationships and really dialing into the individual and getting to know people really, really well, because only then can you start to establish trust. And clients want to work with other people that they trust and that they like, right? And so I always tell the mentees that, the first thing you need to know is your business. You can be a pretty face, you can be highly sociable, and you could be a great networker. But if you don't know your industry, you don't know your business, you can't speak intelligently to what you do and what your company offers and the services that they provide, it means nothing. You're just a shell, right? And so I look at them and I say, you have to be willing to do the hard work. And you're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you need to do your homework. You need to do your due diligence. Before you call a client, you need to understand who they are. How can you speak intelligently to help to service them if you have no idea what keeps them up at night? What are they looking for? What makes you a great consultant? What do you have to offer that they might need? All that is part of your due diligence, So I don't encourage anyone to really cold call. I know that worked for many generations in the 70s and 80s, right? But you just randomly look at the yellow pages and you pick up a business and you try to pitch whatever it is that you're selling. Those days are over. We are very much a relationship-based society. My clients will attest to that, that they call me when they need things. I don't have to hunt them down anymore. And that's when you've established a key relationship because you're a resource. So I tell these younger women and men both, you have to position yourself to the point where you are a valued resource so that they're calling you, for your advice, your recommendation. That's when it turns into a beautiful and successful relationship.
Has that been part of your mantra throughout your career? Like doing a due diligence, being a great, not only a networker, but building true, genuine relationships as you move up your career path?
So I think that's one of the advantages of being Chinese Malaysian is, we were always raised to work hard. I saw my parents, break their backs over what they had to do. And I, by all means, we did not grow up, well off or wealthy. I remember just being glad when we had a roof over our head, and my parents always said, eat everything on your plate.
Don't waste your food.
Right, don't waste your food. My mom always said there are kids starving in Ethiopia. So I grew up with that mindset, and even as an adult right now in my 40s, I try to never waste food. So I think growing up Chinese Malaysian has really taught us to work really hard, to put our heads down. But I think that works to a point in America. In America, what has worked for me is understanding the fact that you don't want to be the only one touting your own accomplishments and hard work. You want other team members to be speaking to the value that you bring on a day-to-day basis. Whether they're your peers, your supervisors, whether it's someone that works side by side with you, it doesn't matter. I want people to say, yeah, did you hear Krista did that amazing podcast, right? And the more people that talk about the value that you bring to work and on a day-to-day basis, the more you're elevating your personal brand and your work performance. Let others speak to your performance and how well you are doing. So I think being Chinese Malaysian for me, I know it's stereotyping, but I most of my friends are extremely hardworking. And I just by talking to you, Krista, I can tell that, we have the same mindset. So yeah, I think that's just, that's really worked well for me. And then when you couple that with your ability to network, and if you have really, really strong follow through, I think that's what sets you apart from a lot of other people.
So that's really good to know, because a lot of people don't know how to break it down into doable,
Action
doable
items.
steps, action item steps,
Mhm.
to get there, because all they want to do is just to become the VP,
Correct. Right. And
but they don't know how to get there.
right. And it's amazing to me, right? When you say, no, you really got to do the hard work, you got to do your homework. And they're like, well, how do you mean? Is it performing on a day-to-day basis enough? And my response is, well, it depends on what you want in life. If you want to blend in like everyone else, that's great too. We all have a place in our company. Not everybody is an overachiever.
And not everyone also knows how to turn their yin into a yang.
Yang. You're absolutely right. That's
So
why
you have to identify that, right? The yin first, then you can turn it into a yang.
right. No, that's an excellent point, which is why, I hope for men and women who read my book, they'll see how I've taken every negative situation, personally and professionally, but mainly professionally, because I'm an Asian woman, into a positive. Go ahead, try to underestimate me. Let me show you what I can do.
And you come back stronger.
Yes, 100%. And I also work that much harder to show everyone on my team, not just the ones who give me a hard time, everyone on my team, the value that I bring on a day-to-day basis. You have to present yourself to a point where your value is so undeniable. They cannot afford to say anything bad about your performance. At the end of the day, in a professional environment, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, a lot more women need to hear that. Men and women, not just women, men and women need to hear that, because I see a lot of people these days, they want to get to the top, but they just don't know how to do it. And I think your book probably would give them some ideas on, like, really go and build some genuine relationships and talk to people. And of course, know your own value too, because if you don't know your value, you don't know what you bring to the table, and no one can really vouch for you or advocate for you, then all your work is futile.
Right. And, I want to be clear. I don't expect all of us to be great at our jobs. And I think there are other strategies you can put in place to elevate your brand and performance. As a quick example, we all have our strengths and weaknesses, right? But in lieu of all of that, you can be your team's best cheerleader, and everybody loves a positive individual. Everybody loves a cheerleader on their team. I'm always cheering on my team, and it makes them feel good, and it creates a domino effect of nothing but positive vibes, right? And so all of those things are, great things. So, and in addition to that, you can be the best collaborator. You may not know everything, but if you are that one person that everybody wants to collaborate with, amazing, more power to you,
Yeah, but I like to go back to the point where you say you can be a cheerleader for others, right? But in the regular world that we are in, a lot of people cannot be a cheerleader for others if they cannot cheer for themselves.
Right.
Which I believe that a lot of people feel that they can't cheer for others, because I think perhaps inside they're not cheering for themselves. They're not their own best cheerleader. So it takes a very strong person with a very secure kind of personality in order to do that for others, to shine the spotlight on others.
So this is what I love about you, Krista. You're very observant and you're very astute. And so you're absolutely right. So which is why in my book, I talk about self-motivation. And self-motivation starts when you find and you're able to ignite the passion in you, right? Because only then, when you can find your passion, the mission to your passion will reveal itself, whatever that may be, right? And so you got to figure out what will make you get up and dance every morning. And I talk about that extensively in my book. If you are going into work every day and you are miserable and you are constantly looking at your cell phone to see if it's 5 o'clock yet, it may be time to find a different dance floor, a different environment, right? I talk about that. I use all these different analogies. But at the end of the day, I want men and women both to put on their dancing shoes because when you're dancing, you're that much happier. And when you're happier, you're self-motivated because you want to do more, and part of doing more is helping others. When you're self-motivated, you're absolutely right. Then the likeliness of you leading your teams better and being the team motivator is that much greater, right? So I have a lot of friends who are at work who are miserable, who are just doing it because it's a means to a paycheck. And for them, I pray and I tell them that I hope you find things outside of work that excites you and that drives you. Because if not, you're just going to die a really slow death. And I talk about this as it relates to my brother's passing. Life is really too short. And we are reminded all the time. I mean, I had to lose a few friends during COVID, and they were, under 50. And so for me personally, death is a very real thing. And so I refuse to live a life that is without passion. That's just not for me. And I want to encourage other people to do the same.
Okay, so now, Dianne, I want to ask you this question, right? If you go back in time and meet a younger version of yourself, what would you say to the 24-year-old Dianne? And what was that 24-year-old Dianne doing at that time? If I could take you back in time.
I love that. I'm a big believer of reflection. And so this question now is forcing me to look back. So when I was in my 20s, I've been in Los Angeles already, and I was pursuing what I thought at that time was my dream job as a news reporter. And I was in the thick of doing that. And, honestly, my main focus at that time was how I was going to make rent, because I was standing on my own 2 feet and I needed to figure out my finances. And every paycheck that I got went to rent because I live in Los Angeles. It's one of the most expensive cities in the world, and I had to survive as a young 20-something-year-old. And then in addition to that, I had to figure out on the weekends what activities I could do that I could enjoy that would be minimal cost, right? Because I was trying to stretch my dollars. And a bulk of the money that I did make from news reporting went to my clothes, went to my attire. Because I knew that as a news reporter, especially on TV, if you wanted to be taken seriously and you wanted to have that level of credibility, you had to present yourself well. And part of presenting yourself is having the right suit, several different colored blouses, good makeup, nice shoes, right? Because we live in a very judgmental world. Let's just be honest. So I was really focused on that in my 20s. Now, based on what I know today, I would have told myself that your college degree and the expectations of whether it's family members or your friends should not dictate what you end up becoming. So take my life as an example. I have a degree from Indiana State University in broadcast journalism. I believe, Krista, you have the same or something similar. And I was a news reporter for the first 7 years right out of college. And then I pivoted into business development for the construction industry. Now, if I were to have stuck to just that path of this is all I can do because that was the college degree I attained, I wouldn't be talking to you today. I wouldn't have written a book. I wouldn't be using this platform to empower other women. I can't predict the future. Maybe I would have found different ways to do it as a news reporter, possibly. I don't know. Right. But I guess my point is you don't have to let your college degree dictate your future. I know a lot of friends who have an accounting degree who end up going into something completely different. And they're successful. And they're happy and they're like, thank God they didn't pursue accounting.
That is true. A lot of people do end up doing a lot of different things. And your degree doesn't dictate anything.
Correct. Right. And don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something else. People say, oh, but you went to, School of Engineering. I mean, it's just kind of like what I learned about life is that the better you can pivot and adapt to ever-changing situations, the better off you are, because then you are more privy to other opportunities around you, because you're not boxing yourself into a specific area or category. Then the world becomes limitless.
Yeah.
Right. Which to me is far more exciting. Like, I'm a little bit of an adventure junkie. So kind of works.
I can see that, Dianne. From your different stints around the world, I think that is quite obvious. And also encourage those who are listening to this podcast episode is go and grab Dianne's book and read all about her adventures in the Middle East.
Yeah, I'm definitely a little bit of a risk taker, but I'm also a Taurus, and I like to take calculated risk. So yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned about opportunities, right? So I do understand that today's world, we have far more opportunities than before. And for any women out there, how do we know which opportunities would be great for us versus the ones that don't really turn out well? Mm-hmm. And perhaps maybe what I'm trying to get at is, what is your thought process when it comes to discerning real opportunities from the not, really worthwhile ones?
Mm-hmm. And so I want to really share more about my life and how I pivoted. So I was in TV news reporting for 7 to 8 years. And then this opportunity came about to represent a firm in business development. And it was an architecture firm that I knew nothing about. I didn't know anything about the industry. I didn't know anything about architecture. But here's what I did know. I knew that I had great writing skills. I knew that I had the social ability to network with the best of them. I knew that because of my upbringing and my mother in particular, my follow through was very strong. When somebody asked me to do something, I always did it, and I did it with style. And so from that standpoint, I was confident with my skill sets and my transferable skills that I obtained as a news reporter. I knew that I was unafraid to talk to anybody at any time, regardless of what their title was, because I had to do it. I had 7 to 8 years of training as a news reporter, and that you can't be shy. And so for me, when I had to pivot and completely leave the news industry, that was a huge risk that I took, right? And my mom said to me, she said, "What do you have to lose?" She said, "If you don't try it, you'll never know, how great you could have been at it." And so my mom reassured me that I had all of the skill sets to be successful, regardless of the line of work I ended up in. And, I credit her for that, right? I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for my mother and her sound advice.
I love the advice your mom gives you in the book. I love all those things that you wrote about your mom, which is to me, it's so adorable.
And so one of the things that she said to me was, Dianne, if you can read, you can cook, but how well you cook is entirely up to you. And those words stuck with me. I mean, she said that to me when I was 6 years old, and it stuck with me ever since. And it's such simple words, but they're so poignant and so impactful. And
it should be on a t-shirt. It should be on a t-shirt.
Totally, Mom.
Yeah.
No, I couldn't agree more. And basically what she's saying is you have all the basic skill sets to be successful. The level at which you want to be successful is entirely up to you. How much do you want to go after it, right? How much of yourself do you want to put into it? And, she did that for her career. She was a very successful businesswoman in the 80s in Malaysia when women were not known to run businesses, to own businesses. But I also saw how much sacrifice my mother had to endure and how much as a family we had to endure that sacrifice with her. Right? We lost a lot of quality time with my mom because she spent her whole life working. But thankfully for us, she was hardworking and she was an efficient worker. So she got things done. So I think really I saw her doing that. And there's so much of me is from my mom. People tell me I look like her. Yeah. You have absorbed all her qualities and all the good words and all the advice that she's given you over the years. Yeah, and I was the accident baby. I was the third and was not expected. And I always tell my mom I'm the best accident she's ever had.
Your mom should listen to this episode.
And then she just rolls her eyes at me like, ugh.
So that means that if I hear you correctly, is that as long as you have a set of skills that you're good at, and you can transfer those skills into any situation, anything that you end up with, it'll still be great because you know how you can use those skills.
That's right.
In the next job, in the next opportunity, right?
Right. And here's another thing I learned from that quote that my mom shared with me is that if you can read, you can cook. Which means that if you can read, you can learn anything. When I got into the construction industry, I knew nothing about the industry. And I was in my late 20s. And that was a risky time to be pivoting in your professional career. Right? Most people by then would have just given in to, this is the path I chose, this is the path I'm going to stick with. So I think the combination of me being a little bit of a risk taker, an adventure junkie, knowing that I had these really strong skill sets. And then in addition to that, you have to be relentless about life. Like I love life. I live every day to the fullest extent. I laugh a lot. I smile a lot. I exude that kind of energy to my team. So again, goes back to, how short life is, unfortunately. And I think if you are relentless and you are persistent and you have that ferocious appetite to be successful, you can do anything. Don't let your height, the color of your skin, where you were born, your ethnicity, the lack of education hold you back.
Yeah. That's a really, really good way of looking at life.
I know it's scary, Krista. I get it.
Yeah.
Trust me, there have been days where I wonder what I'm doing, right? Just like when I decided to write my book. I didn't know how all this was going to turn out, but I knew that I could write a good book. I had a few good stories to share. And I knew that at the end of the day, it came from a good place. I'm defending my people. I'm defending my community. I'm empowering Asian women. I'm empowering all minority women to speak up, to have a voice, to find their platform and to pay it forward. And I knew my message was strong and I had to speak it. I had to share it. But did it scare me? Absolutely. After I wrote a total of 16 chapters. At chapter 15, I was just like, oh God, how are people going to look at this? But then I thought the most rewarding things have the biggest risk. I'm sure when you decided to dive into managing and developing this podcast, you probably asked yourself, is this the right thing to do?
Yeah.
Right. And now you feel fulfilled and you've met some amazing, intelligent women from all around the world, and you sleep good at night, knowing that you're making a difference.
And knowing that I'm sharing the stories of Asian women who need to be shared. To me, the greatest reward comes from hearing the stories firsthand, but at the same time, allowing others to hear the same stories at any time that they want, which is to me the greatest thing about being digital in the digital world. We can have those stories live on for as long as I want them to live on. Yeah. So I think that is the best thing about having a podcast.
Yeah, but Krista, you have a successful career outside of this podcast, and you could have just been plugging along and thinking that, life is great. There's no need for me to do this, right? But there was something in your heart and in your mind that said, no, I have to. Right? I have to give other women a platform to rise so that we can all rise and we can all support each other. And that takes courage, and I know it takes a lot of effort. I've heard your podcast. And you do it really, really well. I'm just so proud of you. I'm so glad our paths crossed. And when I come to Malaysia, I'm hunting you down.
Yes, come to Penang where the best food is. I know you have good food in Klang, but we have really great food in Penang.
I think you have the best char kway teow and the best ha mein.
Okay. We call it Hokkien mee. Yeah, we don't call it ha mee.
And, Hokkien Mee in Klang is the darker version.
Yes.
The thick
Yes.
noodle.
So we have lots of differences when we talk about the same food, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, now I want to get into some stuff that I want to know about you, Dianne. So this is the part where I get really excited when I want to ask things like this of my guests. If you could name 3 things that made you who you are, what would they be?
So I talk a lot about my mom. I would say my parents both. When people ask me if I'm more of my mom or my dad, I tell them that I'm a 50-50 split. I have, my dad's kindness and patience. I also am very fortunate that I have his athletic skills. My dad played tennis. I played tennis. He got me into swimming. I was a competitive swimmer in Klang for almost 10 years. And so that really made me who I am today because I'm very competitive, which is probably why I'm best suited for business development. A lot of it is about winning. I got my ambitiousness and my entrepreneurial spirit from my mother. So I'm kind of an even split. So I would group them as one huge influencing factor. My second is probably my religion. I'm Catholic. I've been praying since I was 6. My parents had a really, really tough divorce. I prayed myself through that, because, in Malaysia, you don't go to a psychiatrist or you don't go to a therapist, right? And so my only outlet was prayer. So I did that a lot. I continue to do that today. And I think my confidence also comes from my faith, knowing that if I fall, God will be there to pick me up. So I always know that in the back of my mind, and that's probably why I'm a little bit crazy.
Good crazy. You're good crazy.
Yes.
Good crazy.
Thank you. And then my third thing is a few years into my construction career, I met my mentor. His name is Guy Mahula. And he happened to be one of the most influential people in the industry in America, and he hired me. And he hired me because he saw my potential. I was just, this young girl, kind of trying to figure out my way in the construction industry, trying to learn who I was, how I could best contribute to my team. And Guy saw me and he saw my potential. He saw my communication skills. He saw my writing skills. He saw how friendly I was. He saw how committed I was to the industry. And he took me under his wing. And I worked for him for over 7 years. And in those 7 years, he allowed me to be in every meeting he was in. He would invite me to the table because most girls, are pretty shy or they're not invited to the table. Guy would make me sit next to him. We would have these high level executive meetings and he would look at me and he would say, Dianne, what do you think? He gave me an opportunity to have a voice. So I write a lot about that in my book. About how having the right mentor is really, really important. If it wasn't him, I wouldn't have had a chance to leave Los Angeles and spend 2.5 years in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, working as an expat. I'm eternally grateful for that because then I went from, a business developer in California to an international business developer from Abu Dhabi, right, which is a big deal in my industry. So I'm grateful for that. So I have to say those are the 3 most important things. Now, in the last few years, I would say my dog, amazingly, has really influenced my life. 5 years ago, I rescued a little puppy. Her name is Ash. And I had a dog in Malaysia, but it was a family dog. And when you have a family dog, everybody takes care of the dog. And here I am, this, really busy business development executive, sitting on several boards, working day and night, adopting a dog. And my boss said to me at one point, how are you going to manage your work life? And my response was, that's why I got the dog. So even though Ash can't speak to me, she barks to me. She's forced me to take my morning runs with her. She's forced me to take my evening walks, and she's brought a lot of comfort in my life. And she's a huge stress reliever. and she's just a bundle of joy and energy. And I couldn't be happier, and I couldn't be blessed. I have a really, really good job and a good boss right now, and a great life at home.
Wow. So Ash is the one behind you all the way.
She's my superstar.
Okay, what about when you feel overwhelmed or unfocused? Is Ash the answer? When you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, or what do you do?
Sometimes I think pre-COVID, coming home to her made it a lot better, because she's always happy to see me. And I think, when I take my evening walks with her, that's when I tend to clear my mind. When I run in the morning, that's when I get my best ideas about how I'm going to tackle my day. And trust me, there's a lot in my calendar. I'm volunteering on 4 industry boards. I have a full-time job. It's a lot. And business development is a never-ending role. There's always another pursuit to chase. There's always another client that you need to be connecting with. It never ends. And so from that standpoint, Ash has been a blessing. But I think COVID has really helped not just me, but a lot of people in all over the world relook their life. Right? I think it's forced us to slow down. It's forced us to really ask ourselves what's important in our life. And we've lost a lot of lives to COVID, and a lot of people have had to endure that kind of pain and suffering. And so you really start to ask yourself what's important and how do you want to spend your time? So I think it's, I know COVID has been, extremely hard for a lot of people. But in my own little world, it's been a real blessing. I'm now working from home. If you haven't heard already, Los Angeles traffic is one of the worst in the world. A lot of us end up sitting in traffic, going from one meeting to another. And it can be very frustrating and very stressful. And so that part of my life for the last 18 months has been eliminated for the most part. We're doing everything like this or on Teams or Zoom. And so I now take breaks throughout my day. I go out to my backyard. I've never seen more hummingbirds and butterflies, in my backyard. And I think a lot of it has to do with COVID, because I think all the traffic and all the pollution in Los Angeles came to a complete halt for at least a year. We're kind of back to normal now. But for a period of time, there was no one on the roads,
Yeah. So I think for many people they have spoken to, they've also said this, despite, of course, all the mortality from COVID, but people can also see that there's something about COVID that made us all stop and pause and review our lives, that we were all chasing after something or doing something and going on this constant fast-paced lifestyle.
Right.
And now we've all had this time to really, everyone globally had to take a break.
Right. So it was a forced pause for a lot of us. But really, to answer your question, Krista, I'm really good about prioritizing my priorities. Because I'm involved in so many different things. As an example, I'm the president of the Asian American Architects and Engineers Association right now. And we have monthly board meetings, and that's just for one organization. I'm on 4 different boards in total, and I wrote a book. So, and I'm trying to, self-promote my book. So I live by my calendar, and I'm a taskmaster. I'm always working on my to-do list, and I'm always crossing out items as I go along, which is, I think for me and for you, I think we're highly organized individuals. We know what we want. We know the direction that we're headed. And when people start to pile things on my day or my calendar, I'm pretty good about deciphering what should take most of my attention, where I need to focus, and what I need to just step out of. There's just some meetings that I don't need to be a part of. I appreciate the inclusion, but there are certain times where you have to trust your team to make the right decision, and you have to just let it go, right? And my job, if needed, I can help with course correction, and I can jump in at a later time. And that's okay, because I also, as a good leader, you have to allow your teams to make mistakes. I don't believe in being a control freak. That's not how I operate. We're all too busy trying to make amazing things happen, right? So I live by my calendar. I'm pretty structured. I don't like the unnecessary BS and chaos. I don't allow for any negativity in my mind. There's just no room for it. I don't have any time for it. I'm always about positivity and productivity. To me, those go hand in hand.
I love that. I love the positivity and productivity. And like you, I love crossing things off my list, whether it's digital or manual. It just gives you that satisfaction, right? That you've done something, and that's the real productivity. And
doing meaningful work, right?
Yeah.
Being very intentional, really understanding where you should spend your time. Because if you allow people to throw things at you, it can get very overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
And I'm at a point in my life right now where I can go, hold on, would love to help you with that. But I'm not quite sure that's the best use of my time, because I have 3 top pursuits in the next 4 weeks that I need to focus on. And I think for the most part, people understand, people go, okay. I said, but I would love an update.
Love that answer.
Thank you.
Okay, and now, what about the best or most worthwhile investments you've ever made?
So, honestly, the best investment I've ever made is in myself. And what I mean by that is ensuring that I have a healthy routine, that I'm taking care of myself, that I'm finding time in the mornings to run, to be at peace, to meditate, to pray, to communicate with my parents as best as I can. I mean, the time difference definitely makes it challenging, and my parents are not really technology savvy. So, FaceTiming them is challenging. I'm like, Mom, it's that button in the middle. Right? And I'm like, Mom, I can see your nose right now. Move your phone away from your face, So, all of that good stuff. I would say first and foremost, investing in my health, really taking good care of myself is number one, because like you said earlier, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. You want to project your best self at work every day, right? So that other people can feed off of that energy. I would say acquiring the necessary knowledge to be successful. I didn't know anything about the construction industry. And now I can speak it like, it's the back of my hand. I would say writing this book was a huge investment of my time, because it's nothing but sweat equity. I don't get paid for writing the book, right? You do it because you have a story to share or several stories to share, and you're passionate about a topic. So this is a form of investment in myself. I bought a set of new golf clubs. I consider those an investment in myself because, in construction, a lot of people golf. And if you're a woman that golfs and golfs well, then you are noticed, right? So that's an investment in myself. And honestly, my puppy Ash was an investment in myself. And so even though I rescued her from a pound, which I recommend everyone does, which is to rescue a dog, and she does have some medical issues, and she's cost me an arm and a leg. But the greater picture is that she's brought a lot of joy in my life. So that's an investment in myself. So I've made quite a few investments, Krista.
You've got a lot of investments going for you. And I hope those really are really good ones, are really interesting investments. Yeah. What about something crazy that you've done? Have you done anything crazy in your life?
So 2 things that come to mind. So a lot of people would say that me pivoting in my careers from being a news reporter to being in business development for a construction industry is pretty crazy, but I don't see it that way. I would say the 2 things that I've done that when I look back, I was like, what the hell was I thinking? One, when I was in college in Indiana, my friend talked me into going to New Orleans, Louisiana. And I love adventure. So I was like, absolutely, And then the next thing I know, I'm on this little canoe in an alligator swamp. And right before they push you off in the canoe from the swamp, they make you sign a release, a waiver to say that if anything were to happen, if your canoe tips or if you get eaten by an alligator, that you cannot hold them responsible. And so here I am, I'm like on this little canoe and it's like, trembling from side to side and I have no idea what I'm doing. And my friend behind me is drinking a beer.
That must be horrifying.
But I don't know what I was thinking at that time. And then I started noticing alligators jump into the water, from land, right? Because they see us coming by. And it occurred to me after all of that they probably saw us as dinner.
Food. Yeah. Live food.
So, when I think about that now, I go, God, that was really stupid. And then I would say the second thing, which again was very much a calculated risk, but kind of stupid no less, was when I turned 40, I thought it'd be a smart idea to jump out of a plane.
Which of course you did.
So I did that. I mean, honestly, by the time they prep you and they suit you up and you watch the video and you sign off on all the release papers, it was like a 2-hour process. And then you ride up in the plane, in this really, really small plane. And by the time you jump off, the jumping off was over in 30 seconds, and you're like, oh, that's it. You're like, I'm done. So, but beyond that, Krista, I'm a pretty cautious person. I don't do things recklessly. I've always, in college, I was always the designated driver. So I'm just that kind of person. I like to play it safe. I take risk, but I'm also very astute about all the different things that's happening around me. So I'm pretty careful in that sense.
Good to know, because we definitely don't want you jumping out of planes or getting eaten by alligators anymore.
When I look back, I don't think I would do that again. And then they didn't put a life vest on you, not to say that the alligator couldn't eat through it. But they were kind of like, it's here if you want it, take it if you need it, and I was kind of like, I don't need it. I was like, I can swim. I was a competitive swimmer, as a young girl. I'm like, why do I need a life vest?
But you have to outswim the alligators.
Like I said, young and stupid.
Very interesting life you've had. Okay, so now the final question before we get to the other final question is that what is a book or books that you've given most as a gift and why?
So I have 3 books, and let me tell you what they are. So one thing you'll learn about me is I'm really big on self-education and self-help books, and I love leadership books. So there's a theme. If you come to my house, everything in my library is all based on business development and strategy, right? So one of the ones that I really like is Awaken the Giant Within. And that was written by Tony Robbins, who is a very inspirational and successful speaker, right? His is always about how do you take your company to the next level. That kind of stuff I love reading because, when I read it, I go, oh, I never thought about that. Oh, I could implement this strategy with my team. Oh, I should be walking into the office with this strategy. I can implement this initiative. So I really like that about Tony Robbins. He's always thinking outside of the box. When it comes to business development, one of my favorite books is called Getting Naked. It's not what you think.
Sounds as interesting.
But it's by this very famous inspirational speaker. His name is Patrick Lencioni. He's written a bunch of business books. And Getting Naked is a focus on business development and how you can be successful. And it's about establishing genuine and authentic relationships. And those are the best relationships in business that you can ever have. So that was a really good book. And then the other book, which is so me and so much of my mother, is Good to Great from Jim Collins, right? I don't believe in being average. I certainly don't see myself that way. So I like to push the envelope, which is what motivates and drives me, right? So when I saw the title of the book, Good to Great, I was like, oh my God, I have to read this book.
That is your book.
That is essentially, I would say, if you ask me, I would say that is my mantra. I always strive on a daily basis to be better than I was yesterday. And I do want to leave your audience with this. When you want something different for yourself, you have to start moving and thinking differently. And the average person might say, why? And my response to that is this: old keys don't unlock new doors.
That's a great quote.
You can try. Right? I always tell people you can try, but you've got to pivot. You have to be able to pivot and adapt, and you have to invite change, right? To have change. A lot of people complain, right, that they're miserable where they're at or the relationship they're in. What are you doing about that today to change things? Are you asking for help? Are you journaling about it? Are you praying about it? Because it's honestly, Krista, it's too easy to complain in life. I could find a zillion things to complain about in my life, right? Yeah.
But the same energy for complaining is the same energy that you use for working on the solution or getting somewhere, right?
Right. So people ask me all the time, Dianne, why are you so joyful? What makes you so happy every day? And I tell people I live a life of gratitude. And the mornings that I don't wake up thinking that way, I remind myself, I have this amazing life, an amazing position to pay it forward and to do great things, right? I want to do it now. I want to do it before it's too late, whatever that may be. And when I say that, it's in relevance to how short life is, because it could be taken away from me in a second.
Yeah. And you reference that in your book too, right? About your brother's passing, which was so shocking.
It was shocking. And I think when your audience reads my book, for those of them who live in Malaysia, they might remember it. I just remember that it was all over the newspapers. And it was so weird, Krista, if I can share with you. I went to Japan a few years ago, and I happened to run into 4 Malaysians who were there. One of them was a dato, and he just kind of said, who are you? Where are you from? And I said, I'm Klang. And he said, how many brothers and sisters do you have? And I said, I have an older sister who lives in Maryland, and I had an older brother. And he said, what happened to your brother? And I kind of just vaguely said he was killed, in an accident in Klang, and it happened at this time. And he goes, I read that article. He said, I know who your brother is. And to me, I thought it was really shocking. Obviously, I called my mother right away, but I thought, what are the chances that people remember these things? Because it was such an unusual incident. So, yeah. But thank you for asking, and thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah. Because I think it is something that, based on that, you live your life better too, because now you know that you have so much to give, and you should share your gifts with the world before we all leave this world.
And I think my brother is looking at me from heaven and saying, Dianne, you have so much to give. You have so much potential. What are you waiting for? Write the book. You might have a few haters. So what? If you can touch another girl's life and you can help them find their way, that's the only thing that matters.
That's exactly like why I do my podcast. If my podcast can inspire someone, if someone hears Dianne's story and say, hey, I want to reach out to Dianne. Hey, I want to meet Dianne if I'm in Pasadena. I mean, that would have been such a rewarding story for me to hear. Like, hey, someone met her and look at their lives change or their paths cross and something happened to them positively.
Right.
So now the final question. What's that final piece of advice or final takeaway that you want our audience or listeners to remember this episode by?
That everything in life starts with respect and kindness. Respect and kindness for you, for yourself, first and foremost. And then, of course, for others, whether it's personal or professional. But, my book, I talk about the professional life. So business development is all about relationships. And as Asians, we have to deal with a lot of misconceptions and a lot of judgment, right? Which is everything that we're talking about that's going on in America right now. And so regardless of what you're faced with, if you can approach the individual or the situation with respect and kindness, that would be my recommendation. With any challenge, with any negativity, with someone at work who continuously puts you down, if you can approach that individual with respect and kindness and then show them your value, that's the route that I would recommend you take.
Okay. And where can people connect with you if they want to learn more about Dianne and your book?
So I'm pretty active on social media. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there. I also have my website, Krista, which I know you'll be sharing with the audience. My book is available on Amazon, and I'm also on Instagram.
Thank you so much, Dianne. I had such a great time talking to you. I wish the interview could go on, but we have come to the top of the hour. And I really appreciate you spending your time telling us about who you are, but more importantly, knowing that you're still very much Malaysian at heart. And you're still definitely an Asian woman at heart.
Yes, and I'm definitely coming to Penang to have a bowl of noodles with you.
Yes, we shall do that soon. So thank you so much, Dianne. Thank you. And I hope to have you back again in time to come, because I have many, many seasons planned out for my podcast. And I really would love to bring back guests and to talk about what they have experienced, once they've been on my podcast, and later they come back and share their own stories, with me and with the guests and with other people.
And I appreciate that. And I appreciate the invitation to be on your podcast. You are doing a phenomenal thing for a lot of women all over the world, Krista. So I want to applaud you. You have my respect.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll see you again.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. This is the final episode for this season, Season 3. I have had such a great time talking to all my guests on this podcast, and I hope you have enjoyed getting to know each of my extraordinary women who are creating their own successes. I want to read out 2 interesting comments that came in via my survey form. If you want to give me your feedback, please check out the survey form on womenpreneurasia.com. A Malaysian listener of mine says that she enjoys my podcast because she gets to learn how my guests started their business journeys and the tough times that they have emerged from. While a US listener said that she liked how I introduced my guests and the various questions about personal and professional life. What about you? Why do you listen to Womenpreneur Asia? For me, I've had such fun interviewing my guests, though it is hard work. For an episode to air, my team and I work at least 8 hours minimum, putting things in order from emailing to pre-interview phone calls, from checking and writing show notes to editing and publishing episodes. As this season closes, I'm really proud that we have put out 40 episodes of women's entrepreneurial stories. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, and better still, get on my email list so I can keep you updated about other exciting things in store. I'll be back with Season 4 in March, with another brand new lineup of Asian women entrepreneurs and their personal and business stories that we can all learn from. In the meantime, please do share my podcast with your friends and people you know who will deeply and greatly benefit from listening to inspiring stories from Asian women entrepreneurs. Happy New Year, everyone, and I'll see you in Season 4.